this young man from the Met that I worked with, there was a strong indication of regional breathing. In other words, maybe a 60% inhalation, 50% inhalation. This was more than adequate. This is a fine singer. He's with the Met now. He used to sing with the opera in Frankfurt when Schulte was the conductor there. And this is a fine artist we're talking about, but he was beginning to experience difficulties, and there was little strains coming in. I just had to touch him, and I knew what it was immediately. But there is a loss of vital capacity with age. In other words, what you have when you're 20 is not what you have when you're 50. And he was 55 years old. I call him young because it's all relative. And anyway, this man was expanding to breathe instead of breathing to expand. He was going through the mechanics, but he was not getting the lung volumes. So I had him inhale specific volumes of air so we knew what he was doing in terms of quantity. Almost immediately there was improvement to where he was quite happy. He left very happy. But he had considerably increased lung volumes by the time he left the studio. He had been suffering a deterioration vocally because the amount of muscle motion was producing less of a product. This is what happens through the pollutants in the air, through the loss of elasticity of tissue, through the aging process. There are predictable losses, and under environmental situations like New York and Chicago, it can be increased even more so. So simply by taking more generalized inhalations rather than regional, there immediately was improvement because there was increased quantity of fuel to work with.
It's my understanding, you'll correct me, that with the loss of air volumes, people start to do things to correct for the loss of air volumes, and they screw up their playing entirely.
Yes, this is true. With the reduction in lung volumes, with the air volumes, there will be automatic activities of reduced space in the larynx, in the pharynx. The tongue will take, in other words, if you want to blow, we'll say for 20 seconds, and you take a certain volume of air, if you take a very small straw, you can force air through for maybe 20 seconds. But if you take exactly the same intake of air and you take a larger straw, you will only be able to move it maybe for half that time. If you take a still larger straw, the same volume taken in will go for still less time. Now, if you don't take in sufficient volumes of air, there will be reductions to where you can complete phrases that you would have completed as a younger person, but it will be done with reduced airways. If it reduces beyond a certain point, the volume of air reaching the lip becomes too small, and the lip will become very difficult for it to respond at all. If you just take your hand and you go against it with a sibilant S, you will feel a large pressure of air behind the tongue, but very little air at the lip, at the hand. If you go and just blow on it, you'll feel a tremendous increase in pressure of air against your hand. The quantities in motion are vast compared to, well, the ability to have the sibilant is not only there at the front of the tongue, it can be through closure in the laryngeal arrangement with the epiglottis, having it come up under there, expansion of the musculatures of the tongue, closing off of airway to where you actually starve the embouchure for air volume. You can have it for air pressure. There will be oodles of pressure, but the volume of air is too small to operate the embouchure. If you go beyond a critical point, the lip will start to fail. In other words, it will start to be very unresponsive. Up to a certain point, there's no harm in the reduction. Past a certain point, it's a disaster. Now, with these people who are suffering lung volumes, this works automatically. Now, there's a cycling that starts. With this increasing sense of difficulty in tone production, the brain stops being positive, starts to say, well, what's wrong? This feels terrible. You can't get the sensations in the intraoral cavity or pharyngeal. You get it from the lip. You'll get from the lip a feeling of lack of response, of increasing resistance, that it doesn't want to respond. What's wrong? You start analyzing it. The first thing, the signal that should be going down the 7th cranial nerve to provide stimuli for the motor reflexes of the embouchure based on conditioning is not taking place. There's a big question instead of a statement. These people very quickly leave the business.
You've told us about the reduction in lung volume that occurs with age, and you spoke about this singer. Will you relate this to why it seems that brass players are on their way out in the 50s, in their 50s?
This would be a question asked by a psychologist because it's in their department. The aging process not only includes a physical deterioration, lessening of some of our potentials, which a person in their 50s are still very viable, functional people, but there's an attitude change where enthusiasm tends to lessen. There's a change very much in perspective. When you're young, I have a young tuba player substituting for me with the Chicago Symphony. He can't wait to go on the stage and demonstrate what he can do with difficult music. There's no worry about that. It may go wrong, but here's Beadlo coming up. I'll play Beadlo. Here's something that's coming. I'll do this. And he'll do it, and he'll do it beautifully. I was this way. As you grow older, there's a caution that starts to come in, and you'll begin to say, now, what if? What if this goes wrong? God, I missed that note 10 years ago, and it's coming up now. Gee, I hope I don't miss it today. The first thing, you're beginning to think negatively instead of positively. This is what I'm talking about. In other words, if you fail to provide the stimulus in the brain, you will not have the physical response. If you've played perfectly all your life, the filing cabinets will have automatic responses that are really quite good. But if you want to take charge, you must sing to your audience at whatever it's going to be. The deterioration that you asked about is an attitude change that comes with the aging process. And of course, there are physical deteriorations as well.